Hello students, welcome to the Analyst dated 5th of August 2023. Today we'll look at 5 important articles from the Indian Express and the Hindu. The first will be the 4 years of abrogation of Article 370. Then we'll look at defamation, disqualification and injunction or stay. Then we'll look at IAM Amendment Bill 2023 which has been recently passed in the Parliament. Then we'll look briefly into restrictions on laptop imports, basically electronic imports, and then we'll look at an institution called the Archaeological Survey of India. Now, the handout of this session is attached in the description. Kindly use it for content enrichment. Now, the first article is regarding Article 370 and this comes from your GS 3. And 4 years have passed since the abrogation of Article 370 and that is why it has been in use. And then also some petitions were pending in the Supreme Court and that is why Article 370 is again in the news. Now what is Article 370? So we are basically looking at a special provision given to the state of Jammu and Kashmir, the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir. And this has some historical background which has already been discussed. Today we look at how it has evolved, how administrative changes, governance changes has helped in the positive development of the region and the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, what was the need for abrogation? So firstly, it is because of terrorism. Now, when we are talking of terrorism, we are essentially referring to the use of violence. To do what? To instill fear. And to get what? What is the end product? The end product is to coerce. It is about coercion of the state. So let's say China and Pakistan, they have a meeting and they decide that they do not want India to expand in the Indian Ocean region. So what they would do is they would militarize the region, and with this militarization what happens? Our focus, our budgetary allocation will be more towards the Himalayan region and thereby our budget spending, let's say in defense sector, that will be lesser on, let's say, our Indian Navy. So is it not coercion? Is it not changing the way India should behave? And this is through violence and fear. And this is permeated furthermore with more and more propaganda with the use of social media and the use of religious indoctrination and inculcating more and more youth who have some kind of fears, youth who have some kind of irritation with the state. There is some friction with the state. There is some historical reason with the state. So if the relationship between the citizen and the state is not well, it's not good, then it is a good region where terrorism can be permeated through systematic engagements of both state and non-state actors. Now, when we are talking about state actors, we are essentially talking about, let's say, the Pakistani military establishment, or let's say the ISI, the intelligence arm of the military. When we are talking about non-state actors, can we say Jaish-e-Mohammed, Hizbul Mujahideen, right? Terror outfits, NGOs, fronts, embezzlements, round tipping, whether it is white collar crime or through any other means, if it is aiding and abetting terrorism, it is somewhere under non-state support. Then overground workers. So we have to understand what was the context in which abrogation happened. So before the abrogation of 370, Article 370, we saw a lot of overground workers. Now what are overground workers? So these are essentially terrorists who are waiting. So there is a large pool of disenchanted youth who can potentially become terrorists. So in the meanwhile, until they are recruited as terrorists, what they will do? They will be trained, they'll be training, then they will be helpers helpers of hardened criminals, hardened terrorists, right? So they will shield, let's say, a terror operation. Let's say there is some cordon operation, some search and cordon operations going off Indian army in the Kashmir Valley. Then these overground workers will start stone pelting. So we saw that there was a lot of stone pelting in the Kashmir Valley. Then some watershed events where the best example is the Burhan Wani encounter. After this, Kashmir went into a lot of disturbance, right? Now, let's take an example. Let's say there is a person and I'm incentivizing that person to create nuisance. So, why will the person stop doing nuisance? I have to go for some newer methods of stopping such nuisance. So let's take the example. Let's say that there is some terror and I ask the terrorist to give up their arms and then I compensate them with money, or I ask them to join politics. Alternatively, I am giving them money or I am offering them bribes to maintain some peace. So let's say there is some terrorism and then there is some bribery. Post bribery, there is peace. But money will be spent. They are offering me 1 crore. I will use that 1 crore, let's say to buy a house, let's say to grab a land. Now the money is over. So again, I will go for some terror plots, some disturbance, some stone pelting. Then again, the state through its functionary will try to bribe me again. Now this cycle continued. As this cycle continued, there were some special interests which were created. So when we are looking at the political class, we are looking at the business class. If we have such special interest who always earn money because of conflict, so would they ever try to stop the cycle of violence, the cycle of conflict, the cycle of terrorism, to say so? Absolutely not. And so there had to be an innovative approach to bring back normalcy, right? Furthermore, what we are seeing is that there was non-application of laws. When we are talking about laws, we are talking about our fundamental rights. We are talking about good statutes like the right to education, your right to information. So any empowering act which has come in India, that was not been applicable to J&K. Furthermore, Jammu and Kashmir region comprised of 3 distinct regions, right? So let's say this is our Kashmir Valley, this is our Jammu Valley, and this is the Leh and Ladakh landscape. So what about the cultural landscape of the Buddhist community? What about the aspirations of the people living in Jammu? So what was happening, that while terrorism was praised and terrorism was rewarded with a lot of bribery just to maintain normalcy and peace for, let's say, 3 months, 6 months, but other regions suffered due to lack of development. So in general, resources were being spent, there was increased militarization, yet there was no final outcome. There was no final outcome towards a better quality of life, towards more peaceful environment. That is why abrogation became necessary. Then the issue of autonomy breeding separatism. Now we will discuss the model of Francis Fukuyama about autonomy and capacity. But here we can just use a small reference that, let's say, I give you a lot of autonomy, then you should also have a lot of capacity. If someone lacks the capacity, I need to help them rather than to give them autonomy. This is a fundamental principle of governance. Now, looking at autonomy in perspective of Article 370. So this autonomy became a reason for alienation, a reason for differences, a reason for not integrating, a reason for developing superiority complex, a reason for finding newer reasons of differences rather than trying to find the common ground with the rest of India. And therefore, integration became very difficult. So while we have to maintain the federal structure, we have to maintain the federal spirit of our constitution. However, national integration under any circumstance cannot be and should not be compromised. Then, the issue of regional instability. So, spanning from the last decade, we are seeing that global terrorism networks, they have evolved. And we have seen that in the nearby region, we have Afghanistan. We have the issue of Taliban. And Pakistan is a natural terror hotbed. It is the mother of terrorism. Then there is Chinese support to Pakistan through the One Belt, One Road under CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. So what is happening? The entire region can become unstable. And if there is instability in a region, can it not cross borders? Can it not affect our lives? And if any state is affected in India, let's say Jammu and Kashmir is affected, let's say Karnataka is affected, let's say Mizoram is affected, will India not be affected naturally? So, any instability in any state or any border state becomes the top priority of internal security. Then, there was a clear disparity. And what do I mean by disparity? So we are talking about divides. So let's say we are talking about economic divide, or we are talking about, let's say, digital divide, or let's say we are talking about tech divide. So what was happening in India was not taking place in J&K. So we are looking at a lot of technological progression, let's say in Bangalore, in Mumbai, in Pune, in Delhi NCR, but there was no permeation, there was no diffusion of these technologies, the economies or the tech to say so. So somewhere down the line, a decade of backwardness or maybe 2 decades of backwardness. Furthermore, alienation with other states, alienation with India, alienation about culture. And if I am not talking to, let's say, anyone in my neighborhood, and I am continuously getting brainwashed, so I will develop some elements, let's say some preconceived notions about the other people. So because of lack of diffusion, what happens over the period of time, the alienation can increase, right? So this was the right move for more integration and more focus towards the entire region, towards all the communities in the region. And therefore, 370 was abrogated and Jammu and Kashmir became a union territory. Now, then there was political empathy. So over the period of time, what we were witnessing is that the leadership was constant. Then the family system in leadership was there. But the political empowerment of people, the participation of people in elections, that was not increasing. That means somewhere down the line, the erstwhile setup, that means during the time of 370, Article 370, the political setup, the democratic setup was not improving, to say so. Finally and most importantly, a minuscule minority was dictating terms. That today we want a bandh, tomorrow we want more money so that we keep quiet for 7 days, 10 days. Then again we'll go for terrorism to extort more monies out of the Indian state. And when I'm saying minuscule minority, so institutions and organizations like, let's say, the separatists, so they would go for the hartals, bandhs, weekly markets will be shut off, roads will be blocked, stone pelting will be happening. So there is already a divide. The divide will be further increased with such activities. Now, what happened after abrogation of Article 370? So naturally, president rule was established. Then there was suspension of internet. And when we are looking at suspension of internet, we discussed a case called Anuradha Bhasin. Versus Union of India. This was to demand that the internet ban in Kashmir Valley was illegal. Right? Then there was disruption. Naturally, when an institution, so Article 370 became an institution. Why? Because it stayed for decades, more than 5-7 decades. So what would happen when such institutions collapse? So it will take some time to revive, to create an alternate set of arrangement, to create an alternate set of governance. Because overnight, the systems cannot be improved. Then there was heavy deployment of armed forces on the borders, inside the Jammu region, inside the Kashmir region. Why? Because there was naturally a tendency of trouble. It was anticipated that trouble is coming on its way. Then a lot of diplomatic firefighting went on with our Minister of External Affairs and all across, not only about the government, but all across the parties. So India as a whole, they went for diplomatic firefighting. And this helped us to get neutral stance from, let's say, the big five, or we can say the permanent five, and also UN. So when we are talking about UN, UNSC, so only China was there to back Pakistan up. However, the voice of Pakistan was not heard, given the might of the Indian economy, the might of India's diplomatic firefighting. Then, what are the long-term effects that we can see? Today, peace is not bought. First of all, there is a limit to which one must budge. So now peace is never bought. It is not about briberies anymore. The state cannot be extorted. So small communities, minuscule minorities of communities, they cannot extort the state out of monies, right? Then we are celebrating the minorities, all the minorities, whether it is the Shia community, Sufi community, the Hindu community, the Sikh community, and therefore there is more appreciation of diversity through celebration of festivals. Then it is estimated that we'll get 2 crore tourists this year. And to compare this with, let's say, Punjab, Haryana, so they get 3 crores. So that means the tourism potential of J&K will be picking up and has already picked up. Then the law and administration. Now your Article 19, your Article 21, your Article 21A, everything is applicable. All the rights that are bestowed in any law to a woman that are being given in J&K. So 350 laws, more than 350 laws were amended and were applied to the state of J&K, to the Union Territory of J&K, right? Then street violence has dropped. So earlier, whenever Kashmir was reported in the newspaper, we used to see that it is about stone pelting, it is about some terror activities only. Now we are looking at G20 Tourism Working Group. Now we are looking at all the Supreme Court judges, High Court judges huddling together and flying to Srinagar and having a meeting. Then the shutdown, which was usually called by the Hurriyat Conference and other separatists, that is not at all effective. Stone pelting is nowhere to be seen. The overground workers have vanished. Furthermore, due to intensive border operations and more surveillance along the borders, what has happened is that the entire supply chain of support for terrorism, that has diminished. However, there are still some issues that persist. The biggest issue is the targeted killing of civilians. So, to target some of the known faces of communities, or to target commoners, let's say laborers who are coming to Kashmir to, let's say, work in a railway project or a highway project. Now, this is an important fact that more than 1.5 lakh crore of infrastructure project is in the pipeline in J&K. So multiple tunneling operations and highway projects are being taken up. Then run of the river projects also for hydroelectricity. So all the true potential of the region is now being tapped. Another issue is that terrorism is gradually permeating to regions of Jammu. Then there are issues of that when elections will be held. There are some debates about whether through abrogation of Article 370 the domicile is being diluted. And then what will be the timeline for finally going towards a statehood? When will the normalcy be established to again make J&K a state? Right? Now we look at the second article. The second article relates to your GS2, and here we look at defamation, disqualification and injunction or stay on the conviction. Now, what is a stay? That we must know. So let's say there is an order by a court and I'm not happy with the order. So what I'll do is I'll go for an appeal to a higher court saying that kindly dismiss the order. But let's say there is no dismissal. Then I'll ask at least stay the order. That means stop the execution of the order and let me go and file the appeal at that same court. Let me ask for a review from the same court. So it is nothing but a temporary suspension of execution of a judicial order. Right? Now, how it all started. So, a political leader, he gave some distasteful remarks about a community in a rally in Kolar, and thereby a complaint was filed under section 499 and 500 of IPC. Now, we must understand what is this section 499 and 500. So 499 and 500, so 499 is basically the definition and 500 is basically the punishment, right? So it deals with defamation. Now we must understand that in India, when we are talking about defamation, it is both a civil and a criminal wrong. So whenever I am talking about a civil wrong, I am essentially going to the court and asking for some money. That you defamated me, please give me 1 lakh rupees. Let's say I am a hot shot. So I'll go and ask for 100 crores, right? But it is totally dependent upon the court to decide what is the quantum of money that has to be settled. Then when it is a crime, whenever there is a crime, the crime is against the society. And so the state will be filing an case against, let's say, X. So if X has defamated someone and if it is a case of criminal defamation, so X versus state or state versus X. Now, let's understand this a little more. So I'm a normal human being and as a citizen of this country, I have my Article 21 rights, my fundamental rights, and these are my right to life and liberty. Now, over the period of, let's say, 20, 25, 30 odd years, what I have done is I have created a very small reputation. Okay? My reach to the community, through my reach to people, I have created my own reputation, created my own goodwill. Now, does that reputation help me? Yes, it helps me. It gives me immense sense of joy, immense sense of pride. Now, is it part of my fundamental right under Article 21? Yes. Now, a simple funda of your rights is that my rights end the moment your rights start. So, if I have my reputation, the reputation should not be damaged by someone else. But that someone else, he or she also has some rights. So, he will have the rights of Article 19, 1A right to free speech and expression. Now, using that free speech and expression, if a person starts going for damaging my reputation, then what happens? Then the limits of his or her freedom of speech and expression is expired. So you can speak, but you can speak with reasonable restriction. You can write, but with reasonable restriction. You cannot harm the reputation of others. Now, defamation is a non-cognizable offense. It is compoundable. When I say compoundable, I am basically telling you that I can settle it out of court. So out of court settlement is possible. Then bailable. So bail is the norm in this defamation. Now, the constitutionality of defamation was challenged in Subramanian Swamy case, and the court held that defamation is a reasonable restriction. Reasonable restriction under Article 19(2). And it is absolutely, and there is no reason to call it unconstitutional. However, the trend in the world is that free speech restrictions like sedition, like defamation, they have been decriminalized or they have been completely removed from the statute. But the Supreme Court has held in Subramanian Swamy case that it is absolutely constitutional. Now, let's look at the conviction. So, because of the statement on a community, it became a class. So, it became a defamatory statement against a class, against a community, against the larger group who are carrying the same surname or similar surnames. So, it was seen as defamatory to the entire class. And therefore, there was sentencing and there was conviction. Conviction of 2 years of jail by a local court in Surat. Then what happened? That the court of CJM suspended his sentence and granted him bail. However, the conviction was not suspended. So whenever I am going for a judicial decision, so I am talking about sentence and I am talking about conviction. So whenever I am talking about conviction, I am saying whether I have done a wrong or not. So the conviction was not removed, but the sentence that was stayed. And there was bail. That means the person is guilty, but will not immediately go to jail for 2 years, right? Because the jail term was given for 2 years. Furthermore, bail is given. So bail is the norm, right? And jail is the exception. And jail becomes the norm for hardened criminals. So bail was granted, and subsequently, naturally, any person will again go for review. They will go for appeal of this judgment. So that was being done, but the conviction was not stayed. Then this also went, the same appeal went to High Court. High Court also gave no relief on conviction. So while bail was there, sentence was stayed, but conviction was not stayed. And very recently, the Supreme Court gave the stay on conviction. It is a stay order. It is an injunction order. Now, what do I mean by stay injunction? That simply means that you can go back to the court and go for an appeal, go for a review to say that you are not guilty. Still, that person is seen as convicted, but the conviction is stayed. Now, let's understand what happens if there is conviction. So, under Article 102(1)(e), if there is any statute, in Parliament or any law which can disqualify you. So Article 102 deals with the disqualification of your member of Parliament, and 102(1)(e) says that disqualification can also happen if there is a specific provision in any law for disqualification. That means it is basically giving the power to the Parliament to legislate any law which can talk about disqualification. And so Parliament came with the Representation of People's Act 1951. And whenever we are talking about RPA 1951, Section 8 of RPA 1951 deals with your disqualification. Now there are several subsections of Section 8, 8.1, 8.2, 8.3. In our case, 8.3 becomes extremely important because 8.3 says that if there is any conviction of 2 plus years, 2 or more than 2 years, then there is disqualification. However, there was a clause called 8.4. So Section 8.4, it gave a breather to the politicians that the disqualification will not be immediate upon conviction if we go for appeal. But this section was struck down. Please appreciate the smaller nuances of RPA 1951 in light of Lillie-Thomas. So 8.3 says that if you are convicted in any offense for 2 or more than 2 years, then you will be disqualified of your membership. 8.4, however, said that if you go for appeal, if you go for appealing, then this disqualification is not immediate. So in Lillie-Thomas versus Union of India 2013 case, this section itself was struck down. That simply means that as we speak, the law of the land is that if there is any conviction for 2 years or more than 2 years, there is immediate disqualification from the membership of parliament. Right. Now, the member of parliament was disqualified, but now there is a stay. Stay on what? Both sentence as well as the conviction. So now comes what happens next. So because of the stay on the conviction, the parliamentarian can very well join back the parliament. So there will be reinstatement, immediate reinstatement. And why so? Because in Lok Prahari case 2018, the Supreme Court held that stay of conviction by the appellate court will stay that disqualification. So the moment there is stay on conviction, the disqualification is also annulled. It is also nullified, right? It goes into abeyance. Till what time? Till the appellate court decides on the matter again, right? Now, the third article is regarding the IAM Amendment Bill. Now, recently, this bill has been passed by the Parliament. So, what are IAMs? These are Indian Institute of Management, and they are basically institutes of national importance. And they are going into your research and development, they are going for education, and they are going for consultancy services in the field of business and management. Now, let us understand the relationship between capacity and autonomy. So, let's say I have very low capacity and I have very low autonomy. Very low capacity and very low autonomy. So, what are we talking about? We are talking about structures of, let's say, third world or LDC countries. When I am talking about high capacity and high autonomy, we are talking about, let's say, Google. Okay. Let's say we are talking about low capacity, high autonomy. We are essentially talking about anarchy. And when we are talking about high capacity, low autonomy, we are talking about autocracies. Right? Now, what kind of governance system should prevail in an institution of national importance? Naturally, when we are talking about our IIMs, IITs, AIMS, and all other institutes of national importance. So, there is very high amount of capacity. capacity of both the faculties, the students, the infrastructure, everything is of top capacity, and therefore it is natural to expect a lot of autonomy. However, this autonomy, any power, excessive power, is bridled with lot of misuse of power. So autonomy comes with, autonomy must also be therefore checked. Why? Because we do not like unbridled power. If there is unbridled power, what happens? The power tends to be abused or misused, right? That is the context, that is the background that we should know. Now, how was IIM governed? So before 2017, what happened is that the board, the chairman, the director, etc., they were all appointed by the ministry themselves. But with 2017 Act, what happened is that a lot of autonomy was given. So eminent people used to come in the boards, and this autonomy was widely appreciated. But over the period of time, what has happened is there is a lot of conflict that has gone in the decision-making process when it comes to, let's say, appointment of directors or giving another term to the director of an IIM. So such tussle has gone between IIM and the government. And so through the amendment, basically the government will have now a superior say in the governance of IIMs, right? Now, there is another issue that there are some old IIMs like IIM ABC, Ahmedabad, Bangalore, Kolkata. And then we have newer IIMs like IIM Jammu, right? So while the older IIMs who are able to generate their own consultancy, they can generate their own projects, and they are superiorly funded, they have a good alumni network, naturally they would like more autonomy. On the other hand, the newer IIMs, they want hand-holding, they want support from their sister concerns, they want, let's say, support from, let's say, IIM A, IIM B, IIM C, as well as from the government, because they want more funds for their development, to say so, right? So there is a divergence between two IIMs. However, the act is same for all the IIMs. Now, there was a slight controversy regarding this amendment bill, is that the consultation pertaining to the amendment was only done with the new IIMs, and the older IIMs were absent in the meeting of consultation before bringing the act. Now, let's understand the structure of an institution. So there is a board. This board is headed by a chairman, and this board appoints the director, and the director is responsible for all academic operations of any single IIM, right? So there is a chairman at the helm of the board, and there is this board is the governing body who appoints the director. So that is the simplified structure of the IIM. Now, the board comprises of a chairman and 3 members, and these 3 members were chosen from eminent administrators, industrialists, education, scientists, technocrats, etc. Now, what are the changes that are coming? So, Section 5 of the Act says now that the President of India shall be a visitor of every institute, and the visitor will have some powers. And these powers will be to make appointments, to audit the working of institutions, to conduct an inquiry. Let's say there is a wrongdoing, there is some financial embezzlement. So the visitor has all the rights to create an inquiry commission, right? Then, how the process will be changed? So, the amendment bill requires the board to obtain prior approval of the president before appointing a director. And if you want to remove a director also, you need permission from the president. Furthermore, whenever we are talking about the president, we must appreciate that it is under the aid and advice. That simply means that now the ministries will be taking these decisions to appoint the top personnel, let's say the chairman of the board, let's say the director. So everywhere the central government will have more say. So prior approval of the visitor to remove the director, chairman, a nominee of the president, currently the chairman is appointed by the board. So let's say we are all part of the board and we cumulatively appoint our chairman. But now the chairman is a nominee of the president. Then the president may appoint one or more person to review the work and progress in any institute and to hold inquiries. So what are the benefits of, let's say, some fund, what has happened of a particular policy, and if there are any embezzlement, so inquiries on the working of any institution. So the issue that is coming in this particular amendment is that this autonomy of IIMs is being compromised, and the compromise is through appointment of personnel and having more say of the president in as a visitor in these institutions. Furthermore, when the president is acting, the president is not acting alone, but is acting with the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers, and thereby there will be more interference from the Ministry of Human Resource, or we can say Ministry of Education. Now, the last two topics are, first one is about the license Raj. So the fourth article is regarding the restrictions on laptop imports that the government has imposed. So India has basically obtained import restrictions on laptops, tablets, and personal computers, basically electronics. Now, what do we mean by international trade? So we are looking at goods, services, people, technologies. So basically to and fro movement of goods and services. Why? Because all these goods and services are not available with all the countries, and therefore there is a natural demand and supply which has to be met globally. Now, the government policy is about licensing requirements, and whenever we see the word license, we remember the license Raj, that is, we are talking about pre-1990. So reforms took place in the 1990s. So before that we were called with license Raj, we were called a quota Raj, right? And with more red tapeism. The time is associated with more red tapeism, more bureaucratic dealing of business and economics. Now, do we see such recent restrictions on trade? So we are looking at the credit card spending that we do abroad. They will now attract higher TDS, tax deducted at source. Then we are looking at stock limit on pulses. Then we are looking at export ban on non-basmati rice. Now, what are the pro and con of this issue? So let's look at the short-term impacts. So first is that there will be supply chain disruption. Why? Because let's say I have given an order for Diwali and I'm expecting that there will be a lot of electronic demand in the country during Diwali. So those supply chains will be disrupted. My orders will be disrupted. Bigger companies like Apple, like Samsung, they have completely stopped their import shipments until they have clarity on the policy. Then supply shortages. Naturally, when we are looking at COVID, we were looking at semiconductor shortage. Now, if there is a restriction or licensing that you require to import electronics into India, then what will happen? There will be supply shortage. And what is the mood, the background of this? Why do we want to do this? Because we are getting $5 billion worth of electronic imports. And more than 75% of this is coming from a country called China. Right? So Chinese electronic imports. Furthermore, we must also appreciate the issue of data. So when the Huawei issue happened with US, so globally there is a consensus that China through its state organs steals a lot of data and engages in espionage. So when we are looking at telecom imports, we are looking at 5G equipment imports, we are looking at more indigenization. So our target is to make in India. Our target is to be Atmanirbhar Bharat. However, while we are going for more domestic manufacturing through your PLI scheme of electronic sector, which is for 17,000 crores, it can simultaneously promote more red tapeism, more rent seeking, and the same license Raj, giving more power and authority to bureaucracy. And if there is more rules, regulations on trade, then what happens? Essentially dampening the potential of trade. Now, we look at the last article. This is regarding the Supreme Court upholding the ASI study on the Gyanvapi Mosque. Now, when we are looking at ASI, it was basically established in 1861 by Alexander Cunningham. And this is basically a statutory act which comes under Ancient Monuments and Archaeological Sites and Remains Act. So, pre-1958 it was not statutory, but post-1958 it has become statutory. Now, when we are talking about statutory, that means a body which derives its powers through a statute or a law, right? Now, ASI is responsible for protecting and preserving more than 3,500 protected monuments and archaeological sites. Now, why do we protect our sites? Because we need to maintain our Indic heritage. And we must know our roots. And we must propagate the best of India. Right? Then it is the primary responsibility of ASI to go for archaeological research, conservation and safeguarding of historic monuments and archaeological sites across the country. Thank you so much. I hope it helped.